There's a certain kind of fear that feels manufactured. The kind you get from movies or books. But the most potent fear, the kind that lingers in the back of your mind long after you've heard it, comes from stories that claim to be true. Stories whispered in the dark, shared on online forums by people just trying to make sense of something they can't explain. Tonight, we're delving into the digital shadows, to a place where anonymity breeds confession. We're looking at 3 true, scary horror stories from Reddit. Our first story comes from a user who posted on a forum simply titled, "What is the most unnerving thing you've ever witnessed?" He was a long-haul trucker, a man who'd seen every backroad and lonely highway America had to offer. He thought he was immune to being scared. He was wrong. It happened on a stretch of Route 50 in Nevada, known as the loneliest road in America. The name fit. For hours, the only light was his own headlights cutting through the oppressive blackness. His only company was the static-laced voice of a late-night radio host. It was around 2 a.m. when he saw it. Up ahead, standing perfectly still on the shoulder of the road, was a figure. As he got closer, his foot instinctively eased off the accelerator. It was a woman, wearing a plain, white nightgown that seemed to glow in his high beams. Her head was bowed, long dark hair covering her face. He was going too fast to stop, but as he blew past her, he glanced in his rearview mirror. She was gone. Vanished. He shook it off, blaming it on fatigue. Just a trick of the light. But 20 minutes later, he saw her again. Same white nightgown. Same still posture. Same stretch of empty road. This time, he was sure. He slowed down, his heart hammering against his ribs. As his truck rumbled past, her head snapped up. He couldn't see her face, it was just a dark shadow under her hair, but he felt her gaze. He slammed the accelerator, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. For the next hour, he saw her every 20 minutes. Always the same. Always standing, waiting. He was in a full-blown panic, sweat beading on his forehead. He considered calling the police, but what would he say? That he was being stalked by a woman who could teleport down a highway? His fuel gauge was dipping near empty when he saw the glow of a remote gas station ahead. It was a beacon of safety. He pulled off the road, his tires crunching on the gravel. The station was closed, but the pay-at-the-pump lights were on. As he fumbled for his credit card, he dared to look back down the highway. Nothing. Just darkness. He let out a shaky breath of relief. It was over. He finished fueling up and climbed back into his cab. As he settled into his seat, he glanced in his rearview mirror to check his trailer. And that's when he saw her. She was sitting in the passenger seat of his own truck. Her head was tilted, and from beneath the curtain of hair, he heard a dry, rasping whisper. "Thanks for the ride." The trucker ended his post there. He never drove that route again. Our second story was posted by a young woman on a paranormal subreddit. She had just moved into her first apartment, a charming but old ground floor unit with a large, wooded backyard. The first week was perfect. But then, the sound started. It began with soft, rhythmic tapping on her bedroom window late at night. Tap, tap, tap. She'd dismiss it as a tree branch, even though she was sure there wasn't one close enough to reach the glass. Then it escalated to scratching. A slow, deliberate dragging sound, like someone was running a single fingernail down the outside pane. She called the landlord, who trimmed the bushes and assured her it was probably just wildlife. But the sounds continued. They became more persistent, more intelligent. It would scratch 3 times, pause, then scratch 3 times again. Like a pattern. One night, fed up and trembling with fear, she mustered all her courage. The scratching started again. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Pause. Scratch, scratch, scratch. She crept out of bed and pressed her face close to the window, her hands cupped around her eyes to block out the interior light, peering into the inky blackness. And she saw it. Pressed against the glass on the other side was a single, pale, human eye, staring directly back at her. She screamed and stumbled back, fumbling for her phone to call the police. They came, searched the property with flashlights, and found nothing. No footprints, no disturbed earth. They told her it was likely a prank, but to call if anything else happened. Shaken, she decided to sleep on the couch in the living room that night. A few hours later, she was jolted awake by a new sound. It was coming from her front door. Not a knock. Not a scratch. It was the sound of someone gently, patiently, running their hand up and down the wood, feeling the surface. Then, she heard the doorknob begin to jiggle. Terrified, she crawled to the door and looked through the peephole. The porch light was out, but the street lamp from the curb cast a faint glow. The figure standing there was tall and impossibly thin. And it was wearing a mask. A crude, featureless, white mask. It stopped jiggling the knob, and its head tilted up, as if it knew she was looking. It slowly raised a single, bony finger and pointed directly at the peephole. Then, it leaned in close, its masked face filling her entire field of view. And it whispered, so softly she almost didn't hear it, but the words were clear. "I know you moved to the living room." She moved out the next day. The last line of her Reddit post read, "I never told the police which room I was sleeping in that night." Our final story comes from a thread asking, "What is your I should not be alive story?" The user was a hiker, an experienced outdoorsman who knew the trails near his home like the back of his hand. One Saturday, he decided to hike a less traveled path, one that wound deep into a state forest. He told his roommate he'd be back by dusk. The hike was peaceful, the silence only broken by the crunch of his boots and the songs of birds. But as the afternoon wore on, the forest grew quiet. Too quiet. He checked his phone for the time and saw he had no service. No matter, he thought, he knew the way. He decided to turn back, taking a shortcut he'd used once before. That was his first mistake. The shortcut led him into a part of the woods he didn't recognize. The trees grew denser, the light faded. He pulled out his compass, but the needle was spinning lazily, useless. A cold dread began to set in. He was lost. That's when he heard it. A voice. It was faint, distant, sounding like a young child calling out. "Help me." His blood ran cold. Was someone else lost out here? A kid? He followed the voice, pushing through thick undergrowth. "Hello," he shouted. "Where are you?" "Over here," the child's voice called back, always seeming to be just a little further ahead. He ran now, his heart pounding, his mind racing with visions of a lost, scared little boy. The voice led him deeper, to a small, muddy clearing. In the center of the clearing was an old, abandoned well, its stone rim crumbling. "I'm down here," the voice called, and it was unmistakably coming from the well. It sounded so small, so scared. The hiker rushed to the edge, peering down into the absolute blackness. "It's okay," he yelled down. "I'm here. I'll get help." There was a pause. Then, the voice spoke again. But it was different. It was no longer the voice of a child. It was low, guttural, and dripping with a malice that made his soul freeze. "I know." And then, from the darkness below, he heard the sound of something massive, something with far too many limbs, beginning to climb. The hiker didn't remember the run back. He just ran, branches tearing at his clothes, until he miraculously stumbled onto a familiar trail and then onto the road. A passing motorist picked him up, a disheveled, babbling mess. He ended his post by saying the park rangers later went to find the well. They found the clearing, but the well was gone. As if it had never been there at all. Whether these stories are accounts of the supernatural, of twisted human minds, or simply the terrifying power of suggestion, one thing is certain, they have left a permanent mark on those who lived to tell them. The digital age has given us a new campfire, a new place to share our deepest fears. And sometimes, in the quiet of the night, it's hard to remember that the screen is the only thing separating their world from ours. Which story scared you the most? Comment below and subscribe for more true horror stories.